Hi, my name is Pam. This is Total Pamarchy. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I make nerdy and pop culture inspired crafts every week, and I usually post on Fridays. This week, because I like to learn new things and I like to challenge myself, I decided to make something I've never made before using materials I've never worked with before. And it was a heck of a lot of fun, so I'll probably be doing this again. But if you know me personally, you know that I love to write. You know that I especially love notebooks of any kind. I just love notebooks. And I had been watching a bunch of bookbinding tutorials, so if you've already guessed it, I decided to make a notebook of my very own. Isn't she beautiful? I just love her. I'd never done bookbinding before, so that was new for me. And the cover is made out of leather, and I've never worked with leather before, so that was new for me as well. I absolutely am infatuated with the notebook that I made, and I can't wait to show you the process of how I did it so I can inspire you to go out and maybe make a notebook for yourself. So let's get into it. I used some standard 12 by 12 scrapbooking cardstock that I stole from my scrapbooking stash. Can you say if you stole it if it's yours? I mean, it's mine. It's not really stealing. Borrowing? Used. I used from my stash. It was 25 sheets that I had in this package. I folded the paper in half. And at first I measured the folded paper to other notebooks to decide on the size that I wanted to make my book. In the end, I decided to cut the folded sheets in half to maximize the paper. So I folded each of the 12 by 12s in half and then cut them in half, giving me 50 folded 6 by 6 pieces of paper. Once folded, I divided the sheets into signatures. So inside your book, and if you watch any kind of bookbinding tutorials, they'll go over this probably in greater detail than I can possibly, but the pages are divided into signatures, so stacks of like 4 to 6 pieces of paper, and then they're stitched up the back. I made my signatures 5 sheets of paper, giving me 50 signatures. Then I marked where the holes would be for stitching the signatures together. I started in the middle at 3 inches and marked holes at 1 inch intervals from the center mark. So I ended up one at 3 inches, one at 2 inches, and one at 1 inches on either side of that center mark. So I ended up with 5 holes in my signature. I used an awl to poke holes through the marks I made, and then using the first sheet as a template, poked holes through the other sheets. I ended up placing a piece of foam underneath the sheets to allow for better penetration of the awl. Is there a better word for that? For better penetration of the awl. No. It's a great word. You just have dirty minds. I also poked the awl through all the sheets once the signatures were together to make sure the holes lined up, and I also felt this would help with the stitching. And this is what the signatures look like after the holes are punched. Very nice. I ended up using a kettle stitch bookbinding tutorial by Sea Lemon, and I'll post her channel down below and maybe up in the cards over here so you can check that out. She has oodles and oodles of bookbinding tutorials, so if you want to know how to do some bookbinding, go check out her channel. She's really, like, her tutorials are really well done. So I'll link the kettle stitch tutorial that I use so that you can follow it along too. I'll kind of go over what I did for this video, but I won't go into too much depth of the stitching, or otherwise this video will be like 2 hours long. But first I tried wax thread from a bookbinding kit that I got for Christmas. The thread ended up being too thick and ripped the paper. Then I switched to cotton sewing thread and tried again, but the thread broke I think because of the thickness of the paper and the thickness of the signatures together, it just wasn't strong enough. So when I was trying to tighten the end of it, it just snapped. It couldn't handle the pressure. So I finally grabbed some black embroidery thread, and that worked. Yay! I was at that moment where I was about to chuck a project across the room because I was frustrated with it. But embroidery thread for the win! So the basics of a kettle stitch: you sew through the first signature, cross it, and then back to the start. Tie a knot on the inside and pull that knot to the outside of the signature, and that's where I had ripped it when I was trying the wax thread. You add another signature, sew up and through to the second hole, then loop the thread around the stitch of the signature below, and continue doing this along the length of the signature, going through each hole, around the stitch of the signature underneath, back through the hole to the end of the signature. And you continue doing this back and forth on the signatures until you reach the end of the last one. You knot a thread and then pull that thread to the outside and cut off any excess. I don't own a book press yet, so I used 4 of my DeWalt clamps to hold the text block together while I glued the spine using Tacky Glue. PVA glue is recommended, but I don't have any. You want to use a flexible, non-toxic, non-acidic glue for this. I applied a second coat of glue and used some pine boards to improve my makeshift book press. I cut and glued black cardstock to the edge of the spine of the text block. Normally these pages would then be glued to the cover, but I did something a little bit different, which I'll show you later. I pressed the pages until the glue dried. Then I reinforced the spine with another piece of paper. In hindsight, I should have used some cotton fabric or linen for this, as they do in traditional bookbinding. And I did have some cotton fabric and linen-like fabric that I could have used. Next time, Batman. I once again pressed the text block until the glue dried. I cut craft board or thin cardboard into 6x6 squares. Then I glued this to the front and back cover. I pressed it with heavy books because I got tired of finagling my makeshift book press together. Finagling, that's a fun word. So my nice, loving, and kind husband let me use some of his leather. This is 5-ounce vegetable tan leather. I cut it down to approximately 6 1/4 inches wide. So that's giving me about 1/8 of an inch leeway on either side of my text block. And it ended up at this point, I think it was around 15 inches long, but I did trim this down later. I checked the fit on my text block. I based my design off a mixed media journal I had, where the cover is attached to the back of the text block and wraps around the book, leaving the spine of the text block exposed. And I'm just showing you that here, which is why normally that black cardstock would be attached to the cover on both sides, and for mine it is not. I then squared off the leather using the marks on my cutting mat as a guide. I marked lightly with a pencil where I wanted my cover design to be. So the design in the front is a Gallifreyan design. It says Total Pamarchy in Gallifreyan. I used a Gallifreyan translator to get the design, and I'll link that website below in case you want to go check it out for yourself. So after translating Total Pamarchy into Gallifreyan using the translator, I printed off the image. I won't bore you with the details, but I couldn't resize the image to fit the cover, so I reduced the measurements to 86% of the original and calculated the radius of each of the circles for the cover. After wetting the leather, I used a wing divider, also my husband's tools, to mark the leather using the printout as a reference. I measured and calculated each circle's radius as I went. This was tedious, and surprisingly, I only messed up once. But I am so happy with the result.
Installation. Let's play.
And honestly, I kind of like that kind of work where you're just concentrating and working away, and you know, as long as you know what you're doing and your brain isn't struggling to figure out like a process, if you know the process and you're just doing the same thing and just kind of working away at it, it's almost meditative. It's really kind of relaxing. Am I weird? I then marked and removed the excess leather. Then I beveled the edges of the leather. I used black leather dye and applied to the front. And then I applied 2 more coats to the front. So I had 3 coats in total to the front of the book. I applied only 1 coat to the back. And then 1 coat of dye to the sides. I buffed the top of the piece and burnished the edges to remove any rough spots. I then applied a couple coats of Resolene. The first coat went on fine. And the second, I made a big mess. I had to enlist a nearby child to fetch more paper towels so I could attempt to salvage my work. Fetch a nearby child. So my daughter had come up behind me to see what I was doing, and because I had suddenly spilled, I was like, "Get me more paper towel! Get me more paper towel!" After wiping it down and wetting the paper towel a few times, I was able to fix my mistake. As I said, I've never worked with leather before. My husband was kind of helping me through text messages as he was at work and when he was home in the evenings to kind of tell me what I should be doing. I have no idea if I did any of this properly. I'm sure he's going to watch this. Hi, honey. And tell me where I messed up. I feel like maybe I didn't let enough time between applying layers between the dye and like the Resolene or like buffing or something like that. I don't think it was dry enough, but again, I've never worked with any of this before, so this is just my experience from working with it. I like how it turned out, and it turned out beautifully. It was just, you know, maybe my processes weren't quite right. So if you're learning how to work with leather, I wouldn't use this as a guide at all. I mean, you can watch it for fun. Please watch it for fun. Please watch it to the end for fun. But I mean, I am no master or teacher. I decided I wanted to make the inside of the text block look prettier when you opened up the book. So I grabbed some cardstock from my stash and cut a piece that I liked to fit the top of the text block. I then applied some washi tape to the spine in an attempt to make it look less shitty. And that's the truth. I could have been finished at this point in time, but I'm extra. I wanted to make the Gallifreyan design jump out a bit more. I taped off the designs and used a very watery wash of gold, which I immediately wiped off with a dry paper towel and a wet paper towel and dried it with a heat gun or blow dryer. I did this several times until I was happy with the result. And it looks pretty good. I mean, some of the acrylic paint, I tried 2 different types of gold paint, one from my stash and a cheaper acrylic from my husband's, and the cheaper ended up working better. It had, and I think the reason behind that, it had less sparkles in it, and mine had more sparkles in it, so when it went on, you could see them elsewhere on the surface. You can see it more on the back here, and it's really hard to see on camera. I mean, I tried to show it, but you can barely see it at all. And even the gold, I don't even know if you can see that. Woo! But it lets it pop a little bit more, which is what I wanted. And I didn't have leather paint to go through with a really fine brush and around the design, and honestly, I didn't want to do that. So I did this instead. Next, I made the strap for the book. I wanted to hold the book closed somehow, so I cut some chrome tanned black leather from my husband's stash into a long strip. I dyed the back of the leather, measured it to the length of the cover, and cut off the excess. I dyed the exposed edges as well. I measured the distance between the front and back cover and cut a black elastic a 1/2 inch longer than that width. Just about 1.5 inches, because it's about 1 inch between the front and back cover. I sewed the elastic to the leather strap on my sewing machine. Ooh, stretchy. Then I measured exactly where I wanted the text block to be attached to the leather and glued the back cover of the text block to the leather. Then I pressed the book with some heavy books again until the glue dried. So the very last step, I attached a rivet to hold the strap onto the book. I had my husband walk me through attaching a double cap rivet to the spine of the book and the strap. This way the strap can be pulled around the book to keep it closed and stays out of the way when the book is in use. And now for some glamour shots. Ooh, ah. And this is my lovely book completed. So on the back, I ended up, I had drawn a line down the back when I was trying to measure the size I want, and I messed up like the best piece of leather. And so I ended up not using this side for the front, which is what I wanted. But anyway, so I ended up just on that line, I wrote my name and just did some more circles. I don't know if you can even see that. So that's the back. And then on the front, it's my lovely Gallifreyan design, and I messed it up one spot, and I'm never gonna tell where it is. You can probably see it though. So when you open it up, my washi tape, which I thought I was making it look so nice, it looks okay. I'm happy. It's my book, so I don't really care. And then it opens up to my cardstock pages, which probably aren't the best for like journaling or writing, but I felt like I could use this as if I wanted to sketch out some spaceship designs for the book I'm working on, or something that I could do that, or just do different family trees, or just other like not like journaling or notes or writing, but doodles and drawings and other things. And that's the back, how it's attached to the back cover. And of course my lovely strap that comes around. Just works, obviously, like this will get worked in with the leather and that. So the only thing I didn't do that my husband suggests is maybe rounding the corners, but I kind of like them square. It looks nice. And then I positioned it so my elastic was on the back so you can't see it on the front. And that's it. That's my personalized Gallifreyan notebook completed. I hope you enjoyed watching this build, and I've inspired you to maybe go out and try making your own notebook or some other craft today. Thank you so much for watching. I would love it if you considered subscribing to my channel. I make nerdy and pop culture inspired crafts every week, or at least I try to when I'm not busy with my day job. And I usually post on Fridays. So that's about it, and we'll see you next week. Why be serious when you can be ridiculous?